So I'll be speaking on the missing dimension of policy making, because black economy is something that's not taken into account. And that's why I'll give a view which is very different from the earlier 3-4 views that have come. Now, without getting it, so I have these books, The Black Economy in India by Penguin and The Indian Economy Since Independence, where I've integrated the analysis of black economy with the Indian economy. Usually, black economy is treated as if it's separate and the white economy is separate and the interlinkage is not given. And the most recent book which has come out from LF on the black economy. So what are the key issues? First is that it's not only economic, but it's also political and social. So we have to analyze the black economy at all these 3 planes. Second is most analysts ignore it as if it doesn't exist. And that's why my argument is that most of the economic analysis of India has been incorrect, because they have not taken into account this very large component of the economy. Third point is that people think it's in the public sector, but it's actually a joint product of the public sector and private sector. There's a book by Professor Covell from London School of Economics in 1990, which shows why it's a joint product between the public sector and the private sector, and I'll come back to that. Now, we've all been talking about remedies, especially after the Anna Hazare and Ramdev movement, but it's not the first time we talked about remedies. We've been talking about remedies for a whole period of time, but we haven't managed to solve the problem. And the reason is we don't have the correct identification of the cause. So it's in a sense, if you have a compass which always points to the east and you're trying to get to the north, and you think east is the north, you'll never get to the north. So you have to have the correct cause, and that's something of a problem. Now, there are a lot of misunderstandings about the black economy. First thing, that people think it's all cash. It's not all cash, and that is the big mistake made as far as demonetization is concerned, that thinking it's all cash, and if we squeeze cash out, then the black economy would go. The second is that people think it's all abroad, that it's not here in India. But as I've shown in my research, only 10% of the black income generated every year goes abroad, 90% stays here, so the solution has to be found here. And as Paranjoy rightly pointed out, what is the money that's gone abroad, where it is lying, and how much is lying? We don't know, because the money, as he pointed out, goes out through a process called layering. There are 90 tax havens, so you go from one tax haven to the next, close the shell companies, and so where the money lies, if you ask the Swiss government, how much money does Arun Kumar have? They said Arun Kumar doesn't have an account, because my money has moved from, say, Jersey Island through a shell company called Crocodile into Switzerland. So therefore, we can't identify the money that's there. Another mistake that people make is that large amount of black income is generated in real estate. Whereas I have argued that real estate is the distributor of black income, not the generator of black income. That is a mistake that was made also in the black money paper that the Pranab Mukherjee brought out in 2012. Okay, now definitional aspects. One mistake that we often make is that we think of black economy as corruption. Corruption is only one aspect of the black economy. Corruption involves a quid pro quo, where I do something and I get something in return, either in cash or kind. A large part of the black economy does not involve any quid pro quo. So if I'm a teacher and I do tuition and I don't declare my income, I generate a black income, but there's no quid pro quo. If I'm a doctor and I see 100 patients and I declare only 20 patients, I charge 500 rupees, but I only declare 100 rupees per patient, then I'm generating a black income, but there's no quid pro quo involved in that. So large part of the black economy involves illegality, but not a quid pro quo. So it's not corruption. But corruption is one aspect of the black economy. As corruption grows, the black economy grows, and as the black economy grows, corruption grows. So in a sense, there's a two-way linkage. And I have given some data in my books where I've shown how the number of scams have grown and the amount of money per scam has grown. To give you only one example, I've given a lot of data in my book, but just to give one example, before 1990, the biggest scam was the Beauforts at 64 crores. Post 1990, if you count the major scams, 91 to 96, there were 26 scams, of which 13 were above 1,000 crores. The largest was the Harshad Mehta scam, which the Janki Raman Committee report estimated at 3,128 crores. Now we are talking about 10,000, 50,000, and 1 lakh crores scams. So the number of scams has grown, and the amount of money involved per scam has grown, and that's one indication of the rate at which the black economy is growing. So black income generation involves illegality, both in legal activities and illegal activities. So illegal activities are like mafia, narcotic drug trafficking, etc. That entire income is black. But you also commit illegality in a legal activity and generate black income. So all sectors of the economy generate black incomes, the legal sectors and so on. So I'll come back to that. One mistake we make is we think of the black economy as parallel. The idea is that the black and the white economy don't meet. That's unfortunately not correct in the Indian context. You generate in the same activity a black income and a white income. So suppose you produce sugar and you under-declare your output by 20%, you're generating a black income and a white income. You go to the stock market, you take a profit, I take a loss, your black becomes white, my white becomes black. So you can convert white to black. You go to a gurdwara, you give a check, they give you cash. So you can convert your white to black and black to white. So a large number of mechanisms by which black to white and white to black can be converted in the Indian economy. So they're not parallel activity. They're not informal activity either, because bulk of the informal sector, where 93% employment is there in the unorganized sector, bulk of the incomes are below the taxable limit. So we cannot call the black economy informal activity either. Even calling it black money is incorrect, because black money is the stock of money I have, whereas the income is what I earn every year. So stock and flow are two different concepts in macroeconomics. So we shouldn't call the black economy as black money. Unfortunately, most people call it that. Okay, how do I generate black incomes? I generate black incomes through this simple mechanism of under-invoicing and over-invoicing. My income is my revenue minus the cost. I understate the revenue and I overstate the cost. So therefore, what happens is that it's through the under-invoicing and over-invoicing that I get black profits, which are off-balance sheet profits, which are not declared. The white profits are the declared profits, which are on the balance sheet. So definitionally, in the developing countries, black incomes are factor income, property incomes, and they're not wage incomes. Unfortunately, in the advanced countries, they tend to be wage and salary incomes quite a bit of the time, but that's not the case in the Indian context. So definitionally, the black economy is very different in India as compared to in the advanced countries. So we cannot borrow from there our theories. Okay. There's another important thing as a result of this, which is that the input-output ratio that we use in the white economy is incorrect, because all inputs are shown to be higher, output is shown to be lower, so therefore the planning exercise goes off. Incremental capital output ratio becomes higher because of the inefficiencies associated with capital. Now, incremental output ratio, as I'll show, is linked to the growth rate, and that's why our growth rate is potentially 5% less than what actually it could have been. Also, what it shows is that the white economy data, the magnitudes are incorrect, and that's why our planning goes off, our analysis goes off. So, for instance, as I showed, employment is shown to be higher, wages are shown to be higher than they actually are. So our employment data is incorrect, our wage share is incorrect. Share of agriculture also is incorrect, because bulk of the black incomes are generated in the services sector rather than in agriculture. So therefore, if you take the black plus white, then the share of agriculture is only 6% of GDP. If you take the white economy alone, it's 15% of GDP. So our analysis of sectoral shares goes wrong, and that's why our analysis tends to be wrong. Exports are under-invoiced, imports are over-invoiced, so export-import data is incorrect, and therefore that affects the balance of payment of the economy, and so on and so forth. Now, distribution is much more skewed as a result, because profits are understated, wages are overstated. Therefore, the actual share of the profits is higher than what is stated in the white economy, and that's why savings rate goes up. The savings rate is higher than what is stated. On the other hand, investment rate is lower. So when we ignore the black economy thinking that all variables will be affected by the same amount, that's not true, because savings go up, investment rate goes down. So things can move in opposite direction. Services sector is affected to the extent of 80%, agriculture is not affected. So we cannot multiply everything by 1.6 and say that we can take the black economy into account. Now, one important distinction is transfer incomes and factor incomes. Transfer incomes are what you generate in distribution, factor incomes are what you generate in production. So what the black economy estimate should count is the factor incomes and not the transfer incomes. Real estate generates transfer incomes, secondary stock market generates transfer incomes, and bribes generate transfer income. So in my estimate, I don't count any of these. Okay. I don't have time, otherwise I would have given an example of why that happens. Okay, so how do I characterize the black economy? There are two ways of characterizing the black economy. By the way, these pictures were put by my brother. I had gone to Yale and to Columbia to give a talk, and my brother-in-law said that your slides are boring, so he put some pictures over there. So it's thanks to him that it's slightly more interesting than what otherwise it was. So I characterize the black economy as, first characterization, digging holes and filling holes. So what is digging holes and filling holes? During daytime, I set one person to dig a hole. At night, I set another person to fill the hole. So next morning, there is zero output, but two incomes have been earned. So this is what I call activity without productivity. Okay. So to give an example, like the pothole roads, you make a road, you don't put enough tar in it, so rains come, it gets washed away. So therefore, the output is less than what your investment implies, so investment productivity is lower. You can go to a pothole road which lead to breakdown of vehicles and accidents, so your capital costs tend to go up. Police collects hafta all the time, and because of that, law and order and crime is not controlled, and therefore governance becomes poorer. Okay? Education system is collapsed in India because of the large-scale black income generation. But if people like me teach well in the class, then nobody would come to me for tuition. And if people don't come to me for tuition, then my income would suffer. So therefore, teachers won't teach well so that they can do tuition. Now imagine what happens to the child. The child finds the class boring, thinks education is boring, therefore gets put off from education. He goes home and the father says, son, if you don't get 96%, you can't enter St. Stephen's College, therefore you do tuition. Now the tutor comes and also makes you mug up. So the child never thinks that the education is very interesting, and therefore your education system has a lot of problems in it because the teachers don't teach well. Okay? There are other reasons also, I won't go into that. Same for health and other things that Rakesh Mohan mentioned, that the problems there are because of the black economy. The second characterization is that the usual is the unusual and the unusual is the usual. What that implies is that that which should happen does not happen, that which should not happen keeps happening. So you should get 220 volt electricity, you'll get 170 or 270, your equipment will burn out, so you need extra capital cost. You should get clean drinking water in the taps, but you can't trust it, therefore you have bottled water, you have ROs and filters, etc., so extra capital cost comes. But above all, what it means is when policies fail everywhere, then the citizen gives up and citizen joins in, and therefore the resistance to black economy comes down. And therefore illegality grows, and this is what's called alienation. So people are alienated from society. Okay, so what about the size of the black economy? Professor Kaldor came in 55, 56 and said that the black economy is 4 to 5% of GDP. In 1970, we had the Vanchu Committee, which said 7% of GDP. NIPFP Committee in 1980-81 estimated to be 18 to 21%. 95-96, my estimate was 40%, and my latest EPW article last year was that in 12-13 it had become 62% of GDP. Now the question is, 62% of GDP of last year of 150 lakh crores is 93 lakh crores. So we're not talking about small change. Madhu Koda case, 8,000 crores, Satyam case, 12,000 crores. These are small change compared to the total size of the black economy. So black economy is really huge, and we're missing out a huge chunk of it. How do we estimate it? There are 4 different methods. I don't have time to go into it, but all these methods are based on the fiscal approach. Okay, so they're consistent amongst each other. There's the monetarist approach, there's a survey approach, there's the input-output approach, but these are all according to fiscal approach. Now, growing scams, as I said, is an indication of the growing black economy. So there are 4 rates of growth of the economy. First is the white rate of growth, which the government announces. Second is the black economy, which is growing. So therefore, the actual rate is the weighted average of the white and the black, which is lying in between. So therefore, the ARA is in between the two. There's a 4th rate of growth. The 4th rate of growth is the potential rate of growth if the black economy had not been there. Now, in growth theory, rate of growth is given as investment ratio divided by the incremental capital output ratio. I just showed you the investment rate goes down in the economy, incremental capital output ratio goes up, and that's why the potential rate of growth is when the black economy is 0, it's higher than the black economy rate of growth. So what I've shown in my paper in South Asia Journal is that we are missing out 5% rate of growth since the mid-70s on an average. If you add 5% rate of growth since the mid-70s to the Indian economy's actual rate of growth, you'll find today the Indian economy is about $16 trillion, roughly the size of the US economy. And our per capita income instead of $1,500 would have been $12,000 per capita. So instead of being one of the poorest 30 countries, would have been a middle income country. So black economy really undermines development of the economy. So this is what the diagram shows, that if the black economy share of white economy goes down, then the white economy would grow much faster, and that's the potential rate of growth. Okay, so what's the impact of the black economy? It's both macro and micro. It has resulted in failure of planning. You're planning for 100, the economy is 162, so you're planning for the wrong amount of steel, wrong amount of finance, wrong amount of everything, so planning fails. Monetary policy fails because you don't take the black economy into account, but the currency in your note in your pocket is neither colored black nor white. It has to circulate both the black economy and the white economy. So therefore, the RBI's equations, monetary policy equations go wrong because of that. Output and employment increase, but compared to the potential, they're lower. So don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that the black economy does not produce output, that it does not produce employment, it does. But compared to the potential it could have achieved, it's much lower. Okay? Inflation rises because all input costs are raised. There's over-invoicing of inputs for generating that. Fiscal policies fail because India is a grossly under-taxed nation. Our tax GDP ratio is about 16%. If the 62% of GDP was in the tax net, you would have got an extra 24% tax GDP ratio today. So your tax GDP ratio would have been 40%. So the entire shortage of resources in the budget is because of the black economy. There's another problem that happens is there's a twin budget impact, which is the shortage of resources, as I said. Second is, as Chidambaram said in his 2005 budget, expenditures don't lead to outcomes, which is what Rajiv Gandhi popularized by saying, when you send 1 rupee to the ground, only 18 paisa or 15 paisa reaches the ground. Not that 85 paisa is eaten up by corruption, there are also administrative costs, etc. But the point is, inadequate amount of money reaches, and therefore you can't achieve your targets. Okay. BOP gets distorted, and the black economy I've shown is concentrated in the hands of 3% of the population. So therefore, the income distribution gets much more skewed as a result of this. It impacts poverty and inequality. And if you look at the gap between 3% and 40% in 95-96, which I have given some data in my book, in the white economy, the ratio of income disparity is 12:1. If you add black, it becomes 60:1. So the real disparity in India comes out of black economy and not out of white economy. It adversely impacts environment because of the corruption and the black income generation. So air, water, forest, all of them get impacted. Urbanization is very critically impacted because of the large black income generation that takes place in the urban areas and in the segment of property. So this further aggravates poverty and inequality. Now, what about the micro impact? As I said, development gets impacted. 2 minutes. Okay. Okay. So it lowers education standards, lower health standards. It impacts our politics because of the elections and what Paranjoy mentioned, party funding and the non-transparency there. It impacts work ethic. People don't do the work that they're supposed to do. Teachers won't teach properly. Doctors won't cure you in time. They'll recommend tests that are not needed. Doctors can sell your case to the opposite party, so you have to be very careful. Chartered accountants will sign on the dotted line. They say that the businessman pays them. So many examples, but I won't go into that. Laws on paper, therefore, differ from laws they actually are. Okay? So we have wonderful laws, but they are hardly the way they are implemented. Okay? Cases are knowingly spoiled, and that's why the CBI has been called the caged parrot. So what are the causes? Okay? I don't have the time, but I've shown in my book why high tax rate is not the cause. Controls are not the cause. These are actually indications of an existence. Cause lies in illegality. So at 62% of black economy is systematic and systemic. It works like a system, just like the white economy works like a system. How does illegality become systematic? Only if corrupt businessmen, politicians, and executives, they work together. And large number of examples are there of how they work together. Now, B.V. Kumar, the customs intelligence chief, wrote a book in 1990. He showed the criminals entered the nexus in 1983 when the amnesty was given to the smugglers and others. Haji Mastan and others, they started entering politics. So that has led to growing criminalization in life. Okay, remedies. We've tried, large number of remedies. There have been at least 40 committees and commissions that have gone into different aspects of black economy. 1948, there was a committee, Caldor in 55, Santhanam in 64, Vanchu in 70, and down the line now to the black money paper and the 3 reports that were commissioned by Mr. Pranab Mukherjee. They made thousands of suggestions. Hundreds have been implemented. So it's not that demonetization the first time. Voluntary disclosure implemented 6 times, but the CAG report in 1999 said people have now become habitual tax offenders because the same people declared in the earlier 5 schemes and also in the 6th scheme. It also said honest are turning dishonest because if you were honest, your capital was not rising so much, therefore you turn dishonest so that your capital rises more. We've reduced controls and regulations post-1991, but the problem is not economic technical, it's the triad at work which needs to be dismantled. Demonetization is theoretically incorrect, I have written a lot on that. Now, how to reform? The framework has to be very clear. We need long-term and short-term, both. But short-term has to be structured within the long-term. Given the shortage of time, these are the list of things that can be done in the long-term, medium-term, and short-term. Number of things can be done in the thing, but I won't expand on that. So conclusion, since I have run out of time. Conclusion is that we need to deal with it at the social, political, and economic problem, but above all, it's a political problem because the triad is controlled by the politics of the country. So politically, we need to. Who can impact that? Only movements can impact. Okay. Now, if you can tackle the black economy and gain 5% rate of growth, which is what Rakesh was talking about, then you've got it. Last 10 years you've had 7.5%, you can go to 12.5% if you just tackle the black economy. Okay, and therefore, it's a positive sum game. we cannot depend on a benevolent dictator. Rajiv Gandhi came with the idea that we'll clean up the economy, clean governance and everything, but he got embroiled, everybody around him got embroiled in corruption. If you look around the world, most dictators, whether it's Abacha in Nigeria or Hosni Mubarak in Egypt or Marcos in Philippines, most of them got corrupted, even though they started off with some clean ideas. And I'll close with the Bali Ramayana. Okay? So what is Bali Ramayana? Bali Ramayana is enacted in the Hindu island of Bali, in Indonesia, which is a Muslim country. And this Bali Ramayana is enacted by men in check lungis. I was very struck when I saw that in 1988. And there Ram shoots the arrow, Ravan falls down, but doesn't die. Next second he gets up and keeps fighting. In our Ramayana, we have a one-shot solution, good defeats evil. But there, evil and good coexist, and that's why you see the men enacted in check lungis, the coexistence of the good and the evil, And therefore, there's no one-shot solution to the black economy. It has to be a long-term solution where political movements have to play their role. Thank you very much for your patience.